Odenga was a young boy with a mystery hidden in his hair. Born in the small village of Umuoma, he had lived all his life under the watchful eyes of his mother. Odenga's hair was different. It was thick, long, and unruly, standing out among the other boys in the village. He never had his hair cut, not even a trim. His mother always found a way to convince the teachers to leave his hair untouched. The villagers whispered amongst themselves, questioning why Odenga's hair was never cut. But no one dared to confront her mother. She was a quiet woman, but her silence spoke volumes, and many believed she had reasons only known to the gods. From a very young age, Odenga had heard stories about Okike, the ancient god that protected the village of Umuoma. It was said that Okike had power over life and death, and many believed that blessings and curses came from him. Mama Odenga often told him that his hair was sacred and must never be cut until he turned 50. To a 10-year-old boy, 50 seemed like a lifetime away, but he trusted his mother and obeyed her words. The weight of his hair became the weight of his secret. He knew he was different, but he did not understand why. Odenga's mother had made a covenant with Okike, a god of Umuoma. When she was a young woman, she had been childless for many years after her marriage, and in desperation, she visited the shrine of Okike. The chief priest told her that if she wanted a son, she had to promise the god that her son's hair would not be cut until he was 50. Mama Adaeze, desperate to bear a child, agreed without hesitation. A year later, she gave birth to Odenga, and from that day, she had kept her end of the covenant, never telling anyone except her son about it. At school, Odenga often faced teasing from his classmates. The boys would call him Lionhead or Forest Boy, laughing as they tugged at his long hair. But Odenga was strong-willed. His mother had told him that his hair was a symbol of strength and a mark of his destiny. Despite the jokes, Odenga held his head high, believing that one day everyone would understand the importance of his hair. His teacher, Mr. Chijioke, however, was not one to be swayed by traditions and beliefs he didn't understand. One hot afternoon, during their physical education class, Mr. Chijioke noticed Odenga struggling with his hair. It was heavy and sweaty, and Odenga kept pushing it away from his face as he ran. After school, Odenga rushed home and told his mother what had happened. Mama Adaeza's heart skipped a beat. She knew how serious this could be. She sat Odenga down and repeated the story of the covenant with Okike. "Odenga," she said in a trembling voice, "if your hair is cut, terrible things will happen. Okike does not forget a promise." Odenga nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He promised his mother that he would never let anyone touch his hair, no matter what. Days turned into weeks, and the incident seemed to have been forgotten. But one day, during the end-of-term celebrations, Mr. Chijioke decided to take matters into his own hands. He called Odenga to his office and, without warning, took out a pair of scissors and swiftly cut a chunk of his hair. Odenga screamed and tried to run, but it was too late. The hair, the sacred hair, had been cut. The room went silent, and a cold chill swept through the air. At that moment, a strange wind blew through the village of Umuoma. Trees swayed violently, and a dark cloud covered the sun. The villagers felt a sudden fear, sensing that something was terribly wrong. Mama Odenga, working in her small garden, felt a sharp pain in her chest. She dropped her tools and ran toward the school, her heart pounding like a drum. She knew something had happened to Odenga. When she arrived, she saw Odenga in tears, holding the cut piece of his hair. She fell to her knees and cried out, "Okike, forgive us! We have broken the covenant!" The sky roared with thunder, and the ground trembled beneath them. Mr. Chijioke, now realizing his mistake, stood frozen, his face pale with fear. He He tried to apologize, but Mama Odenga was inconsolable. She grabbed Odenga's hand and rushed him home, hoping there was still a way to make things right. That night, Mama Odenga took Odenga deep into the forest, to the shrine of Okike. She carried a goat, some yams, and palm oil, hoping to appease the angry god. They arrived at the shrine, and the chief priest, an old man with white hair and a long beard, greeted them with a stern face. "You have broken your promise," he said, his voice echoing through the forest. "Okike does not forget." Mama Odenga fell to the ground, pleading for mercy. She explained what had happened and begged Okike to spare her son. The chief priest listened quietly and then spoke. "The covenant was with you, and you alone. Your son is innocent, but he will suffer for your mistake. His destiny has been altered, and only Okike can decide his fate now." Odenga, standing beside his mother, felt a sudden chill. He did not understand everything, but he knew that his life was about to change. The chief priest began a long chant, calling upon Okike to show mercy. The forest became eerily quiet, and the wind stopped. After what seemed like an eternity, the priest stopped and looked at Odenga. "The gods have spoken," he said. "There is a way, but it will not be easy." Mama Odenga looked up with hope in her eyes. "What must we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. The priest explained that to undo the curse, Odenga must undertake a journey to the sacred river at the edge of the village, where he must bathe for 7 nights under the full moon, without speaking a word. During this time, Mama Odenga must stay in the shrine, fasting and praying for forgiveness. Odenga and his mother returned home that night, their hearts heavy with fear and uncertainty. The villagers whispered amongst themselves, knowing that something was terribly wrong. Odenga felt the weight of the curse on his shoulders, but he was determined to save himself and his mother. The next night, he began his journey to the sacred river, alone and afraid. For 7 nights, Odenga bathed in the cold waters of the sacred river, under the watchful eyes of the moon. He felt a strange presence around him, as if the spirits of the forest were watching. On the final night, as he stood in the river, he heard a voice whisper in the wind. "Your fate is not yet sealed, Odenga. Your hair was your strength, but now you must find strength within yourself." Meanwhile, Mama Odenga, weak and frail from fasting, prayed fervently in the shrine. She called upon Okike, the god she had once trusted, to spare her son and forgive her for breaking the covenant. On the 7th day, as the sun rose over the village, the chief priest approached her. "The gods have heard your prayers," he said, "but know this, woman, your son's life will never be the same." Odenga returned from the sacred river, his body exhausted but his spirit unbroken. His hair, once a symbol of his destiny, was now short and uneven. The villagers watched in silence as he walked through the village, his eyes filled with determination. He knew he had to find a new path, a new destiny that was not tied to his hair or the covenant made by his mother. Life in Umuoma slowly returned to normal, but Odenga knew that the shadow of Okike would always linger over him. He had survived the curse, but he had lost something more than his hair. He had lost his innocence, and in its place, he had found a strength he never knew he had. His journey was far from over, and the lessons of Okike were just beginning. Months passed, and Odenga became more withdrawn. His classmates no longer teased him, but the change in his hair and the strange events at the shrine had left everyone uneasy. Even Mr. Chijioke, who had unknowingly caused this chaos, kept his distance, filled with regret. Odenga's nights were restless. He would often dream of the river, the whispering winds, and the voice that told him to find strength within himself. One evening, Odenga made a decision. He approached his mother, who had grown thin and weary since the incident. "Mama," he said softly, "I want to understand more about Okike and why my hair was so important." Mama Odenga looked into her son's eyes, seeing a maturity that had not been there before. She nodded, knowing that it was time for him to learn the full truth. Together they went to the house of the village elder, Nze Akachukwu. Nze Akachukwu welcomed them and listened intently as Mama Adeza recounted everything that had happened. The elder stroked his long gray beard thoughtfully and then spoke. "Odenga, your mother's covenant with Okike was not just about your hair. It was about protection, a bond that connected you to the spiritual realm. When the hair was cut, it broke that bond, and now you are exposed to both good and evil forces." Odenga listened carefully, his mind absorbing every word. "What must I do now, Nze Akachukwu?" he asked. The elder smiled gently. "You must learn the ways of the spirit. You have been chosen for a reason, and only by understanding the forces around you can you find peace." The days that followed were filled with lessons and stories from Nze Akachukwu. Odenga learned about the spirits of the land, the ancestors who watched over them, and the balance between good and evil. He discovered that his journey to the sacred river was only the beginning of his spiritual awakening. He had to confront the unknown, face his fears, and embrace the path that Okike had set before him. One night, Odenga had a vivid dream. He was back at the river, but this time he saw a figure standing in the water. It was an old man with eyes that shone like stars. "Odenga," the man said, "you have learned much, but your journey is not over. You must now seek the wisdom of the ancestors' grove." Odenga awoke with a start, his heart racing. He knew he had to find this place, but he didn't know where to begin. He went to Nze Akachukwu the next morning and told him about the dream. The elder's eyes widened with surprise. "The ancestors' grove," he murmured, "is a sacred place, hidden deep within the forest. Only those chosen by the gods can find it. If you were called in a dream, then it is your destiny to go there." Odenga's resolve was firm. He prepared himself for the journey, packing only what he needed. His mother, though worried, supported him. She knew that her son was no longer the boy who had feared the taunts of his classmates. He was becoming a man, one with a purpose beyond their understanding. The forest was thick and daunting, filled with sounds of creatures unseen. Odenga walked with caution, guided by an inner sense of direction. Days passed and he encountered many challenges: wild animals, harsh weather, and eerie whispers that seemed to come from the trees. But he pressed on, remembering the voice from his dream and the wisdom he had gained from Nze Akachukwu. On the 7th day, as the sun began to set, Odenga found himself at the edge of a clearing. In the center stood a circle of ancient trees, their branches twisted and gnarled, forming a natural archway. He knew he had found the ancestors' grove. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the circle and immediately felt a powerful energy envelop him. He saw visions of his ancestors, warriors, healers, and storytellers, all standing before him. A voice, deep and resonant, spoke. "Odenga, you have come far, but your journey is only just beginning. You have broken a covenant but gained a new purpose. You are now a bridge between the living and the spirit world. Use your knowledge wisely." Odenga knelt on the ground, feeling both humbled and empowered. He knew his path would not be easy, but he was ready to embrace his destiny. He would be the one to bring balance to Umuoma, to honor the spirits and to protect his people from the forces that sought to harm them. With newfound strength and wisdom, Odenga began his journey back to his village, knowing that his story had only just begun.